Brother Sionetter and Soul Brothers Boutique Production. Brother Booker T. Coleman lecturing on the hidden wisdom of the black hole. The ancient science of mathematics is deep within the black woman's womb. Give Brother Booker T.
Don't forget about the children. Turn your mic on, brother.
Yeah, hotel.
Hotel.
I'd like to thank my brother Sionetta and Soul Brothers Boutique for inviting me to be a part of this day with you. I'd like to thank my brother Big Man for being here and for all the support that he's given me through the years, and to all of us here present on such a beautiful Sunday. There's so many things we could be doing with our time. For us to take this time to find out about certain things about ourselves is a mark of our own excellence and resilience as a people. The theme that I've been asked to speak on was a theme that I've had to do a lot of research on. And I can see people in this room far more of an expert on it than myself. Because no matter how much I may research and study the role of the African woman, since I'm not an African woman, I only know half of the truth. So that in the questions and answers and in the comment section, I invite, I implore, I ask very strongly that the sisters here remark and comment on the things that I'm about to say. Because clearly my version of what I'm going to say may not be from where you're coming from. But I'm hoping that as an African human being, having experienced what I've experienced, that I can at least start to get things going, to have us start to think about certain things. I've given a handout to all those that have come, and we will continue to give handouts. And the reason why I've done that is because I represent an institution, an organization known as the Per Ankh. Many of you are a part of it, some of you know of it. And so much of what I do, much of what I say comes out of this experience. We are facing very critical times ahead as a people. And one of the things that I would like to first stress is that I'm not coming necessarily to speak on the history of it. I'm really coming to speak on science and math. Because as I view us and as I hear people talk about us, as I watch like it is today, focused on the 5 trips, the 5 countries that President George Bush went on a few weeks ago, this being August 24th, 2003. I've come to realize what a great people we really are. And the more I experience some of the negative aspects and some of the ways in which people abuse us and use us, and although I wish that as a people we could just stand up once and for all and do what needs to be done as a people, I know that that hasn't come yet the way it should come. The fact that we're here, we're doing it. So it's happening as we speak. But I just can't help but admire us and respect us. And I found it very appropriate that we would speak on the role of the African woman and the role that she plays. But not just from a woman's perspective, because that would limit my abilities to speak on this issue a great deal. And so the handouts that I've given you reflect what I'm calling astronomical biology and biological astronomy. Because again, in the Per Ankh, we always try to focus on science. And now, science, according to the research we've done on our ancestors, represents all knowledge. This is why one of the characteristics of God, creator, however we would like to call this creative force, this greater being, is omniscient. And scient meaning knowing, all knowing. So science is all knowledge. And in ancient Kemet, it was represented by a bird, by an ibis bird, a bird with a very long nose. But to stop there would only tell half the story, because this ibis bird has a counterpart. I don't want to use the word wife, because in ancient Kemet they didn't use those kinds of terms. It was the other side of whatever that entity was. It was a counterpart. It was what made that entity complete. And the counterpart to this ibis bird, Tehuti, or Thoth, or Jehuti, was a female known as Ma'at. And Ma'at also was a bird. Ma'at, very interestingly, represented a female ostrich, because that's what the feather was from. It was from an ostrich. And Ma'at was the counterpart to Tehuti. Ma'at representing balance and justice, representing the path, all things that would balance and keep things in place. So it's interesting that you would have knowledge, but that the counterpart of knowledge would be a path. So that the path is what keeps you on the road to knowledge. Because our ancestors believed in duality, they believed in twinness. So one of the first things we have to talk about is the fact that from an African perspective, from the research that we've looked at, whether it be the Dogon, whether it be the Moors of North Africa, which encompass a large numbers of different groups of people, the Moors meant black, just like the word Ethiopia meant burnt faces. Now, I want to also caution us this. These are not our words. These are words that were put on us. We would not call ourselves black, because we were black. We were called black by people who were not black. So the word Ethiopia, although all language now, we know language as Africans moved around the planet, all human life being African, of course we invented language, we invented writing, so that's already known. But once a depigmentation process occurred and once a change occurred, then we begin to see people coming back to the land, and the people that they view, they're calling different. It is just like this Native American celebration that's about to come through, the Shinnecock out on Long Island. Then you have the Matinacock on Long Island. These are the original Native American peoples. The peoples that we see who they say are Native Americans surely could not have been the original Native American people. They couldn't have been. And the reason why is because the people we see today, complexion-wise, somewhat are close to the complexion of the European American. When these first peoples came to the shores of America, not just the Caribbean, because that would have been a copper people. That would have been the Arawak or the Taino, the Lucayo, the Carib. Okay, we already we know what they were. But when you come along the northern part of this continent, and these Europeans come in contact with these peoples, the first thing they call them is red. And the first thing the indigenous population called these invaders is pale. So there had to have been a stark difference between the complexions of these two people, not by my word, but by the words that we hear them calling each other. So that the view that people had coming into a land immediately create a look of the people. And what's so interesting is that the European, African, as Dr. Richard King would call them, is very steeped in complexion. And that is why Dr. Du Bois said at the turn of the century that last century, the 20th century, the biggest problem of the 20th century would be along the color line, not the culture line, not the ethnic stock line, but along the color line. So that if you were a certain complexion, that would make you nearer to a better, and the darker you were, made you less. So that Europeans are not caught up in culture, they're not caught up so much in race, because there is only one race. What they're caught up in is the initial physical, visual view of what they're looking at, they judge you by. So that the word Moor and the word Ethiopian, although if you go back into the roots of it, certainly has an African flavor to it, but it is a word that peoples unlike us put on us, projected on us in order for them to be able to deal with us, because they cannot deal with anything that they do not know and have put into a category. So that as we look at the words that we're going to use today, and as we go through this path of righteousness and of knowledge, of science, we're going to see a few things. And what I'd like to just do is outline for us just an understanding, just from an astronomical point of view. We're talking about a black hole. Before we even get into the other aspects of what a black hole is, because a black hole we find, again, looking from an African perspective, the most important things in the cosmic universe repeat themselves constantly through the universe. And as we're able to adapt these concepts onto things, we better can explain them because of the nature of us understanding the original of the words. So that one of the first things I want to do is I want to look at the handout that I've given you. I just want to rotely go through this for the camera's sake and for our sake, but just in case we have questions, just exactly what I've given you, why I've given it to you, and how we can begin to understand this. The title, The Hidden Wisdom of the Black Hole, Ancient Science and Mathematics Deep Within the Black Woman or the African Woman's Womb. Because it's important to understand it. I didn't put that in the title, but that's what we're talking about. Because as far as I'm concerned, there is only one womb, and that's the African woman's womb. To say the African woman's womb would assume that there's another kind of womb, and there isn't. We following along with what I'm saying? See, we got to understand this. There's only one human being on the planet. This human being has gone through, according to research, a mutation. It has adapted to its surroundings in order to survive. If it didn't, it wouldn't survive. So therefore, a dark complexion, curly hair, wide-nosed, thick-lipped African individual would depigment itself into the straighter hair, the aquiline nose, the thinner lips, the lighter complexion, the hair on the body in order to survive a devastating ice age. Now you want to talk about a Ma'afa, a terroristic disaster? You want to talk about an Mfakani? You're talking about the ice age. Yes, African folk have gone through ours also, but that's a man-made, a human-made Ma'afa. This was a nature-made Ma'afa. And so that we as an African people, because of our movement across the planet, and then because of environment, have been impacted by our environment, which has brought us to the conditions that we find ourselves in today, looking the way we look. So I want to return back into the cosmos. Long before there was a human life, long before there was an organic life, there was a cosmic life. And if estimations are right, give or take billions of years, we're talking about anywhere between 12 and 16 billion years. But again, brothers and sisters, I ask us not to get too deep inside of time, because time to the cosmic reality is unimportant. In fact, the cosmic reality that we're experiencing right now could have happened billions of times already, and this just happens to be another big bang along this long road of righteousness and balance. For all we know, we could have gone through this before. Each and every one of us has been here from the beginning of time. We are here now, and we will be here forevermore. This is one of our problems, you know, because we know this. And we allow people to treat us a certain way because we know that this is just a phase. But you know, we also have to put things in check in every phase also. So we can't afford to get too comfortable here. We got to put people in their place. But it's the funny thing about African folk, we can see the future. We know things naturally, but at the same time, even though we know this, you know, you can't let people get away with certain things. You got to put them in check so that we can ease up on this problem that we're experiencing right now. And this problem, I've often said, black folk don't have a problem. White folk have a problem. We just happen to suffer from the problems that they have. We have to answer to them because long before they were ever on this planet, and I'm not saying we were perfect, we had our times too. There is no good and bad in any one thing. In organic life, all things have its up and down, but it's the law. Evil was codified by European peoples. Evil was codified by European people. The wrong way was written into law. And people practiced that law. And that is why people can view a black man getting almost beat to death. And I'm not talking about Rodney King. I'm talking about that brother in California just a few months ago. 16 years old. And they literally will look at that and say, I don't see what my lying eyes are telling me. This is their law. Pedro Albizu Campos, a brilliant Puerto Rican revolutionary, once said, when tyranny is law, revolution is order. Pedro Albizu Campos, a brilliant Puerto Rican revolutionary brother, once said that when tyranny is law, revolution is order. Do you understand? Yes. But it means nothing if someone's illusion has become another people's reality. And that's what we're experiencing as a people even to this very day. This is what we're experiencing. Brother Dr. Wade Nobles, California, once said that power is the ability to define someone's reality and have that individual accept that definition as their own. And that's what we're experiencing right now. We are experiencing somebody defining us as a people, telling us who we are. And not only have we accepted that definition, for some reason we believe that we were the ones that wrote it down in the first place. And so therefore we're living out someone else's illusion. And so as a people, as a chosen people, because this is a chosen people, you know, that's why I often tell folk, don't get too concerned if the house is not full when you have your presentation. Because if the house was full, there would be no such thing as a chosen people, because everybody would be there. A chosen people are but a few. A chosen people are a few that realize the times that we're living in, understand its urgency, and understand that something has to be done. Every time within human history that you see this, it is only that select group of people that survive. Everybody else is flushed out. This is the way it is. Go back in history and you'll see it. Go back to ancient Kemet, go back to the Moors, go back to Dogon, go back to Africa, go back to Asia, go back to Europe, go back to Native American. Whenever a people are in critical times, and only a few understand really the times they're living in, it's only those few that survive. You know, we're more than Japanese people on the planet. Why are they so powerful? You know, you don't need a lot of people in order to run a nation. All you need is committed people who are issue-oriented and not personality-inclined. See, we live in a personality-inclined kind of situation, where when we come into a group, the first thing we talk about is how people are dressed, what they look like, how they talk. That's a personality-inclined individual. We've got to be about issues at this point in our history and time. In a little over a week now, we're going to start the worst educational process this country has ever seen since Native Americans ruled this land. It's the first time. I've been teaching 23 years in this system. Brothers and sisters, I have never, ever seen it as bad as it is right now. And it's bad because we let it happen. Regent Adelaide Sanford told us at First World Alliance, I'll never forget the last time I saw that. She came and she spoke and she said, and she kept repeating this, so I assumed this was her theme. She said, you all thought that what I was saying was entertaining you. She kept saying this. Because, you know, Sister's very poetic, very articulate when she speaks, and she sounds good. Just like Bob Marley's music, you know, you get so caught up in Bob Marley's music, you forget he's talking about them belly full, but we hungry. Or Natural Mystic. Or stand up, get up, stand up for your rights. We can forget the words because we're so caught up in the mesmerizing effect of the music. Well, Regent Sanford speaks in the same kind of manner. She speaks so wonderful, so poetic, we get caught up in the flavor, the rhythm of her words, and we're not listening to what she's saying. We, when I say we, I mean I and I, because I don't speak in the individual, in the collective. For the past, I know at least 20 years, I've been warning this day was coming. I've seen it coming. They co-opted the Board of Education, built on the African freedmen's model. We invented the Board of Education, you know. Back in the 50s, 1840, 1850, 1860, African people came together. Of course, no, you have to have Europeans around in order to make it valid, because it's not valid unless they're around. We developed a way in which we could take public monies and educate children. We collected monies in the churches. We collected monies just in little groups. We would go around to little towns and collect money. And we'd put it into a bundle and we'd educate. That was the beginnings of the concept of educating children through public monies, not through personal monies. And what happened is that when New York City, with the turn of the century, of last century, the 1900s, they were trying to find a way in order to make this happen. Because they understood, of course, all of the rich people understood what was coming down the road. And what was coming down the road was the middle management positions. The people who they didn't want to think, all they wanted them to do was to be able to read, write, and calculate. It wasn't about thinking. It was about reading, writing, and calculating, memorandums, typing. They saw this coming down the road. And so they had to pull children off of farms. And in order to pull people off farms, they kind of talked to the parents to get them away. They say, look, we'll let your child wake up with you and they can till the soil with you. But about 8:30, 9, 10 o'clock, we want you to send them to this place here. We want to educate them. We want to teach them how to read, to write, and to calculate. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. And once we get them to understand this, then we'll send them back to you by about 1:30, 2 o'clock, and they can continue on the farm with you. And to throw in an extra perk, what we'll do is that they can stay with you July and August. So you can reap what you sow. No educational mindset went into why they would formulate an educational institution. The Carnegie Commission, 1909, go to Columbia and check it out. 1909, the Carnegie Commission came together and said, you know, this is what they developed. They developed the way in which they were going to educate children. And they said, you know, we noticed that 44, 45 minutes, that's a sufficient amount of time to teach somebody something. Well, now as an educator, we know someone can learn something in 4 seconds, 4 minutes. Sometimes it might take 4 hours, 4 months, 4 years, 40 years. It's all according to that person's perspective on learning as to how they're going to pick up this information. So nobody knows, but they guessed 44 minutes. That's why we have 44-minute periods today in school. No educational research went into why a period would be 44 minutes. You understand what I'm saying? See, in Africa, it was totally different. Because in Africa, we had something known as the apprenticeship, where we assigned ourselves an elder who would teach us who we were, what we would be, and how to become that. That's what it was about. But now when you take your children from a personal setting and put them in a public setting, now you've got to create the kind of environment that financially is most rewarding. And it was developed around an economic situation. It had nothing to do with whether or not the children would learn, because all they wanted the children to do was to read, to write, and to calculate. But down the road, some of the children started saying, you know something? I can think. And that created a problem. Okay, but now here's the problem. They took this industrial concept of industrializing a child's life, and they superimposed it over an agricultural system. Because it was an agricultural life. It was geared towards being able to work on the farm and learn, read, write, and calculate at the same time. So it's an agricultural base, but it's an industrial revolution or an industrial concept superimposed over that agricultural base. Now here comes the 21st century. We're not even in the industrial mode no more. See, because the plantation life created a system that would make people have to do things at a quicker pace. And you can go back to the early part in Africa where we started farming and begin to see the way in which the human mind works. The human mind is always trying to do something quicker and better so that they could do something more important. That's not how this system is functioning now. The reason why we should have invented electrical elevators, automatic elevators, was so that that elevator worker's child could go on to something bigger and better, like a doctor or a lawyer or something else, to bring the society up. Instead, that saved them rich people money, so instead of taking that person and putting them into a higher level of consciousness, what they did is that they eradicated the job altogether. So now you have another person out on the street looking for a way to live, because there's no place for them anymore. It's like playing musical chairs. There's 3 chairs and 4 jobs. Somebody not going to work. So the mind makes it so that from farming you can go to industry, which means that you can do things quicker and better, but you're going to have a space here now because you're not going to have to do this anymore. Now what happened was industry evolved into what? Technology. Now in 2003, September of 2003, these leaders, one is a businessman and one is a lawyer. Neither know anything about education. I can tell you that right now. I can tell you that just by the meetings that I've attended. You want to know a meeting that I attended? I attended a meeting and I spoke to the people in the Parank about this, the scribes there. I went to a meeting because, you know, they know I have a mouth. So they always try to figure out what the mouth is going to say. So what they do is they invite me to these think tanks out on 40th Street. They have one out on 40th Street, right down the block, right off 5th Avenue, between 5th and Madison. They have a little building there. You'd be surprised. When you walk into this building, they have a table. At this table, they have microphones and tape recorders. And in the corners of the building, they have cameras. And all along this one wall, they have a mirror. And by law, they have to let you know there's somebody behind those mirrors. By law, they have to let you know that. And so the whole time that I'm in this think tank, I'm knocking on the mirror. Because I'm just trying to let them know that I'm watching them just like they watch me. I can't see you, but I'm still watching you. Well, what they'll do is that they set this up. They set up the question so they can find out a little bit about you. And so they say to me, they say, what do you think about the changes that are happening in the educational system? See, I've been here before. I was here when they did the multicultural thing. They wanted to know what would happen. Me and his sister shut the whole place down. There were 12 people at the table. We shut them down because, see, what you have to do at these kinds of meetings is that you have to shut them down. But you got to do it non-emotionally. When you walk into a meeting with them, the first thing you have to understand is that, just like Dr. Clark told them when he had that debate, there's no debate here because you don't have a point of view. See, that's what Dr. Clark shut that down. You know, psychologically, what that brother did at that meeting was absolutely brilliant. He shut the whole thing down. Everything that happened after he said that really was an African view. Because he shut down anything that could come from them because he was telling them from the beginning, you don't exist. So you got to shut them down. They said to me, and there are different ways you can shut them down. The worst thing that we can do is get upset. That's the worst thing. That's what they want. Because see, once you get emotional, then you're in their ballpark. That's the one thing. And somehow or other, they're always able to get some of us involved in an emotional argument. And this is why I say science is so important, because science is a method of looking at something that follows step by step, that the human mind can follow step by step. Emotion is irrational. You can draw from things that don't pertain. And therefore, that's when they start playing with things, because once you start pulling things in that are not valid, they can pull in anything they want to. And that's when they start saying things that trip us up. So you stay scientific with them. And they say to me, how do I feel about what's happening in the Board of Education? So my first response back to them is always, well, what do you mean by that? You need to be more specific. I can't answer a general question like that because you can take it any way you want to. So I've got to ask you to be specific so that when I ask you to be specific, I make you jump into the same pot that I'm in. But it's like if I answer that question without them being specific, they can take me any place they want to from that point on in the discussion. But once you grab them and you pull them in the pot with them, I can't get out, but guess what? You can't either. So then you got to go for what you know at that point. Okay. I asked them to be more specific. They say, well, the changes that have occurred in the Board of, and now this is a paraphrase now, the changes that have occurred in the Board of Education, as you see them, do you see them being able to bring the children to understandings that they could not understand before? This is a paraphrase. In other words, are things getting better? And I say, well, you know, we have all not introduced ourselves at this table. And I need to know who everybody is in here. And I said, I just want to ask a question. I said, I've worked with the Board of Education since October of 1979. And I just want to know who in this room has been a new... Now, we're facing, the teachers are on one side, they're on another. I'd like to know who in this room has taught in the New York City Board of Education more than 3 years. And not one of them could raise their hand. You see what's happening? The mayor hired business people. The people he hired to shape the Board of Education were the same people. Mind you, the chancellor was the one that went after Microsoft. He was the lawyer on the Microsoft case. He's the one that brought Gates down. The current Joel Klein. He's not an educator. And when none of them raised their hand, I said, you know, the reason why I asked you this question is because if I wanted an after-school job in the Board of Education, for those of you who are educators, you have a sense, it's called per session. One of the duties, one of the requirements before you can even apply for this after-school job is you must be a New York City teacher for the last 3 years. Am I right, Sister Nancy? You got to be a teacher. I know Sister Nancy is a teacher. That's why, and I'm sorry if others are teachers here also, but you know if you apply for a per session job just to teach after school, now you're going to tell me that you who have shaped and formed the future of the educational system have not been in the classroom for 3 years, yet you're going to tell me after 23 years how to teach these children that you, first of all, you're not even culturally aware of, but you're going to tell me how to teach them? You are the ones that's going to form this unified curriculum, and you've never taught a curriculum. Who's writing the curriculum? So that's how you shut them down. We shut the place down right there. There was no more to be said. Because how are we going to engage in a conversation when even if I answered you, you don't know if I'm right or wrong? But I'm giving you this background information just to help us understand what's going to start in September for our children. But please make no mistake about it. I've been almost every phase of the educational system, from a substitute teacher to an assistant to a superintendent, working for the state, writing tests for the state, been on the city level. I've been there. I've seen it. I've had to pay my dues, but I've been there. When we have a parents' meeting and there are 800 children in a school there's a potential 1,600 parents that should be in that room. Potential 1,600, considering 2 per child. Even if you wanted to say all daddies were gone, there should be 800 there. When 5 parents show up, they know we sold our children to them. We did this. Make no mistake about this. They didn't stop us from going to those parents' meetings, brothers and sisters. We have to be clear. There's one thing I loved about Malcolm. Malcolm didn't tell us what we wanted to hear. He told us what we had to hear. And so I want to be honest, because in being honest, we can find the truth, the road back to where we made our mistake. When the district offices were having their meetings once a month, and there were more district personnel there than parents there, they knew they could smack us from one side of the room to the other, and nobody would say anything to them. And that's how Klein slipped in. Because if we had an effective parent role, and now they got these parents sitting up here, 1,200 parents going to sit on a board. Come on. We know that's nonsense. It's ineffective. So that when we're looking at a curriculum and we're looking at the per onc and what we have to do, we are the chosen people. We are the people who realize what time it is. We are the people who would go to the parents' meeting and to the district office meetings and to all the meetings that occur. So I'm really kind of preaching to the choir, I know that. But we wanted to talk about certain things that help us understand the role of us as a people, and particularly of our women, because clearly the feminine principle is the centerpiece by which everything revolves around. We know that in astronomy, even when you look at the word astronomy, ast, Ra. Ast is the feminine principle. Ra is the light and heat energy, and nomi is the study. Astronomy would be the study of the feminine principle of light and heat energy that creates life. Now that's not far-fetched, because every woman on this planet, or I should say the only person on the planet that can give birth is a woman, so that's not far-fetched. It's interesting how they've taken the atom and they've broken it down to a proton, neutron, and electron. And it's interesting how they made the proton the male and the electron the female. That's backwards. The electron circles around the nucleus and the proton. When you look at the society, it's the male that revolves around the female. When you look at the African society, when you look at the Native American society, it is we, the male. We have our job. We're not talking about better or worse, more important, less important, superior or inferior. That's not the point. And as African people, we understood this Ma'atian balance. We understood that in order to stay on the road, you had to have knowledge. The road being feminine and the knowledge being male. But at the same time, we also knew that the path was needless if you had no knowledge. So it wasn't that Ma'at was more important than Tahuti, or Tahuti was more important than Ma'at. It was that together they create life. The twinness of life, the duality of life. So that we're not here to talk about superiority or inferiority. We're just talking about we're out of place. And the reason why the world is out of place is because the feminine principle is out of place. In every facet of our society, it is out of place. She is out of place. And it is not just the feminine principle in terms of a woman coming from the organic life system as a human. The feminine principle finds itself in every part of nature. The male principle in every part of nature. If you want electricity, you will take a male plug and place it in a female outlet. Together it creates electricity. No matter how you may take that plug and another plug and put it together, or an outlet and an outlet together, you will not get electricity. Electricity occurs between male and female. That is how it happens. That is how we can see it from an electrical perspective. It finds itself in everything in life. But let us return back to our point. I was being reactive. Now let's be proactive. We're talking about the problem. Let's start talking about the solution to the problem. Now, if you will look at the first page that I gave you, has anyone come in since I've... Okay. The hidden wisdom of the black hole. And what we're calling it is astronomical biology, and I'm taking passages from books that I think apply to the topic of the day, which is black holes. When we look at Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Neil deGrasse Tyson is a brother, a brilliant brother. I love that brother. I got all his books. He is the one that developed the new so-called Hayden Planetarium, the Rose Center. Okay, he put that together. He's a young brother. Maybe he's about 48, 49 years old, I believe. Brilliant brother. Of course, when I go into the index of his books, and again, I have to say this because this is really how I feel. When I go into the index of his books and I look up the word Egypt, because that's the first thing I always look up in an astronomy book, Egypt, and if you only have one number, one page of Egypt, then I know you don't know what you're talking about, but you may know on another level. But you don't know the origins of what you're talking about. You may know it, but it's like if somebody told it to you secondhand and not knowing it from the primary source. I respect the brother. He has an enormous amount of information in that mind. He has done wonders for young African American children, whether they speak English, Spanish, or French, in order to getting them interested in astronomy. He himself, being a Bronxite, involved and impressed by looking at the moon in a telescope when he was a young man, and from that point on always being motivated to the fact now that he is a leading astrophysicist. Okay, I could give you his credentials and all that, but that's not really what's important right now. I respect him, I love him, but he just doesn't know the origin from whence he speaks. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because the last thing any of us need to do is knock each other down, and that's not what I'm trying to do. But what I'm trying to say is that the brother has a lot of information, but in quoting Copernicus and Newton and the others, I respect that, but they were quoting the Kemites and the Moors who taught them this in the first place. So we got to be aware of this, but at the same time, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't stop reading the book because he doesn't mention Egypt. Keep reading it because what he's saying is in fact valid to a certain point. He just don't know where he got it from. You see what I'm saying? So, we'll start with his book because he's a brother. Neil deGrasse Tyson says that in the 1970s, they demonstrated mathematically that there exists a negative black hole, one that regurgitates matter rather than eats it. Every black hole connected to a white hole through a tunnel-like wormhole. Now, a wormhole is like an intergalactic subway. Okay? Now, let's go to the next one so we can now define what a black hole is. See, we're going to get deep here. Because whether you realize it or not, in your sleep, you go through black holes. In fact, your consciousness, the reason why that black dot is there, that black dot is a black hole, which Dr. Richard King calls a doorway to the unconscious, that can take you places that you just can't necessarily think of. It can take you there through geometric progression. It can take you there in ways that you may not even know yourself you're going. Our ancestors, our Kemetic priests and priestesses, our South African, Azanian priests and priestesses, our West African, wherever we find ourselves in Africa, we knew how to catch the subway. We used to take the A train, in fact. And we knew how to go there and go where we wanted to go and come back and be able to deal with our life. We have forgotten where the subway station is. Where we are right now in our life, we have forgotten where the subway station is. We actually believe other people who have never been on the subway don't even know the subway exists. We believe them when they say the subway doesn't exist. That's where we are as a people right now. That's why we can't access the information we need, because we believe the hype, the illusion that they've created. In each and every one of your minds, whether you know it or not, you have the potential to travel wherever you want to, and don't let the Milky Way galaxy be your only stop. Because even in this galaxy, you have 4 quadrants. You have the alpha, the beta, the gamma, and the delta. But you have billions of galaxies in our cluster. And there are billions of clusters in the supercluster, and there are billions of superclusters in the cosmic universe. Can you get to that? And we limit ourselves to Africa. We're not Africans. We just happen to be Africans because light and heat energy created organic life there. That is why when you look at the Kemetic story of Nut and Geb in A Lover's Embrace, and Shu comes and separates Nut from Geb, it's not Geb. Geb is the earth. Nut is the sky. Nut is pregnant, not Geb. Geb is male, Nut is female. But if we are of the earth, why wouldn't Geb have been female and Nut be male, and that the earth be pregnant and we come up? Because we are not of the earth, we're of the sun. We are pieces of light and heat energy entombed in these physical confines that walk this planet. But we're not of the earth. It's not ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's light to light and energy to energy. And that's where you're going to return. You're not going to return to the earth. Your nitrogen piece is going to stay here. But certainly your electrons are constantly going to be moving up, and that's what they can't get over, that carbon reaction, the carbon-14 dating, carbon-14, nitrogen-14 dating. They really trying to figure this out, because they believe they're going into the earth, and then something going to happen where they're going to go to heaven. No, don't feel bad. They also believe that Santa Claus come down a chimney. Look, a brother like me in the Amsterdam projects knew that there was no Santa Claus, because no Santa Claus coming down no chimney in the project, because we don't have no chimneys. That's an illusion. And we bought into it because, you see, they're children. Don't blame them, they're children. No more you get upset with a child who believes in Santa Claus. Don't get upset with Europeans, they're children. They're no more than maybe 15, 20,000 at most, and I'm being nice to them. That's how old they are. We're millions of years old. We were here for millions of years before they even thought to mutate themselves out of us. It's like the children that take over a household, where the mother and father and grandmother and grandfather there. How is this child going to tell the adults what to do? I don't understand that. Well, that's what we're living right now. We're living in a world where the children are ruling the planet. And they don't know what they're talking about. They don't even know the subway station exists. Now, what I want to do is go into another one of his books. Another one of his books, which I think is very interesting, is called The Universe Down to Earth. He says black holes are gravitational holes. Now, keep in mind gravity. Gravity is what keeps us walking on the planet. If we didn't have gravity, we would float. You know when they go up in space and you start seeing them float? Well, that's zero gravity. There's no gravity, so they float. What keeps us walking, what makes us get on a scale and weigh ourselves, you're not weighing your weight, you're weighing your gravity, your pull on the planet. So what makes us stay on the ground is gravity. Okay, it's a pulling. Black holes are gravitational holes in space and time that look black. Now, let me tell you something else as I go through this. As black folk, once we get this together, our children's children's children, we're going to be talking differently. But right now, this is all I can say, because this is what research has told me. But there's another African way of looking at this, a deeper way of looking at this, that we're going to try to unfold in the Per Ankh, that we're going to try to get students to understand as these seasons go through. There's a deeper way of understanding this, but this is what science tells us right now. So we're going to deal with this right now. That look in space and time that look black. A black hole's surface gravity is so strong that the speed one needs to escape from it is greater than the speed of light. Since light itself cannot escape, this is why the black holes look black. All hope would be lost for you if you happen to stumble upon one. Unlike a simple hole in the floor, you can fall into a black hole from any direction. Now, see, you got to think about this, because it means that it is atum. If you want to get into the Kemetic story, it's atum. If you want to get into the biological story, it's what's in here. It's only envisioned here because this is an entry point. But you can get into this from any direction. It grabs you. Look at what the melanin molecule is. What does carbon do? Carbon captures and keeps light. That's what creates light, the idea of the carbon atom. And the things that come out of the carbon atom in terms of organic life. Yes, the properties of black holes would make a good script material for a science fiction horror story. Okay, now, the other flip side of horror is holy. You could find out where you came from if you understood a black hole, because each and every one of us came through a black hole. And what started our venture into becoming who we are started in a black hole. And this is why when you hear Dr. Ben say, Dr. Ben says that heaven is between the black woman's legs. Well, this is what he means. Now, he comes out flip, okay? It sounds flip, we all laugh. But scientifically, he's exactly correct, and that's the theme of today's presentation. Because everything is contained within the African woman, particularly the womb. Because every child, as I understand it, every young lady is born with everything she'll ever have in life. So she must be born with every child she's ever going to have or not have. She must be born with every concept she ever thinks or doesn't think. She has to be born with generations of thoughts and children. And this is why we pass down heredity through the woman. And that's why it was so important for things that, look, for those who get married, what do we call it? We don't call it patrimony. What do we call it? Matrimony. Because the man marries the woman doesn't marry the man. But when you're a European, you can turn things around and make it seem a thing when it's really not. Matrimony is when you align yourself to the feminine principle to find your destiny. That's what we used to do as a people. Now it's a whole nother thing. Long before that, we got these prenuptials and all this other stuff that they created that people actually get into. They are the most ridiculous human beings on the planet. I swear. Come on, let's be serious. These are children, ignorant children that we're following. Because my first thing, if I was a woman that asked me to find a prenuptial, well, what am I marrying you for if you know we're going to end it anyway? It ain't till death do us part. It's until you get tired of me. Come on. Isn't that what you're saying in a prenuptial? It's so ridiculous. Well, why are we following this sort of stuff? And every time we follow them, we get in trouble. We got to come back and just have a theme called Kobe Bryant. But I got to come back and talk to you about that. Now, I took what might be considered an encyclopedia. It's called the National Audubon Society. By the way, if you would want to look at these books and get into these books, I have pages so that you can I've referenced the pages too in case you want to find these spots and get deeper into this particular passage. But on page 17 and 23, this so-called encyclopedia in astronomy says black holes are so dense that not even light can escape their intense gravitational fields. See, light is fast now. Light is considered to be very fast. And if light is fast, its momentum can pull itself away from anything that exists. You see what I'm saying? Let me stop here and give you an example of what I mean. You take a lion and you take a panther. My favorite animal, panther. Take a lion. A lion has the kind of massive strength that if it strikes you, it's the strength that's going to hurt you. A panther doesn't strike you that way. A panther starts to move towards you and pick up speed so that by the time it gets to you and swipes you, it has the same strength that the lion had standing still. Both will feel the same way, but one had to use momentum to get to you, and the other just had it right there. You see, light is the kind of thing that moves so quick, no matter how you may try to hold it back, it can escape, no matter what. That's what science says. Black holes are so strong, no, you ain't going nowhere. It'll capture it and hold it. That's the concept of the carbon atom, the concept of the melanin molecule. The complexion that we have is that the carbon, the melanin that we have within our skin captures the light and heat energy and won't let it go. And then that's what creates the other pieces that goes inside internal neuromelanin that creates the life system that creates the wonderful people that African folk are. When we moved out of the sun, light would try to escape, and because of the nature of the imbalance of our melanin molecule, it could free itself. And so it moved away. And as it moved away, it couldn't be captured, and therefore the process took place. Well, that's what black holes do. Black holes will capture light and heat energy and won't let it go no place. Black holes pull in stars. Now, mind you, stars are much larger than black holes. I remember in science class, I used to do a project where I would take like a bottle that had a hole about yay big. And what you do is that you take a fire. You light a fire and you put it inside the bottle and you put an egg over the hole. And because of the nature of science, the egg gets sucked into the bottle. You know? No matter how big the egg was, it still can fit through that small hole because of the nature of, and stay whole too, it won't split. Sometimes it splits, but for the most part it goes in and doesn't split. Well, that's what black holes do. Black holes will suck things in, no matter if it's larger than the entry point of the black hole. You see? It pulls in stars, gas, and dust surrounding the galaxy's center, and as compressed and heated, they emit radiance we perceive as quasars, astronomical beacons of light that beat like a cosmic heart. Now, what I wanted to do was I wanted to explain what a quasar is, because we need to understand the quasar, because once I introduce something, we got to go through. So we go to their favorite person, man by the name of Dr. Carl Sagan. Oh, they love Carl Sagan. He died, you know. I'm only mentioning that. He passed away and moved on into the heavens. But Dr. Carl Sagan, he had a video series. He also has a book that's a companion to the video series, and it's called Cosmos. Wormholes, cosmic umbilical cords. Okay? Astronomically speaking, a wormhole is like an umbilical cord, where one side is the placenta and the other side is what it gives birth to, or is what's feeding it cosmically. So, wormholes. Wormholes are theoretically used to get from one place to another in the cosmos. This is what he says now, in the cosmic universe, without covering the intervening distance through a black hole, because that would be too massive to be able to go through. Now, here's where interesting things happen, because somebody may get upset and they question where I'm coming from. Well, I hope they do, because they can't prove there's such a thing as a wormhole. This is all theory. Keep in mind, this is all theory now. None of this is fact. What I'm saying to you is, I am putting together the information we have as of this date, and I'm presenting it to you, comparing it to a black woman. That's what I'm doing. But I'm setting this up in order to make this happen. This is theory. But there's one thing I know. This does exist within the black woman. And the fact that each and every one of us are in this room today is evidence that this is not a theorem. I mean, this is a theorem in terms of what we're saying, but we're basing it on their theory. But their theory came from our theorems, which we knew how to control. And that's what made African folk look like they were magicians. They weren't magicians. Chem mystery. Chem black mystery. Mystery. Might call it black magic. A black mystery. But it wasn't a mystery because nature is not cruel. Nature is careful. And nature only gives what the mind can handle. In an African mind that had based its entire essence on itself, on nature, understood how to deal with these things. Europeans don't know how to deal with this. They got a hold of the power of the sun and they created a hydrogen bomb. They didn't know that Kemites and other African nations and Native American nations and even some Chinese nations based on the African dynasty system understood how to take the power of the sun and use it. See, because that's what all this war is about. This is why Bush went to Africa. Bush didn't go to Africa because he wanted to. Bush went to Africa because he wanted energy. And isn't it funny how oil is black and it's the base of energy? Diamonds are black. It's really cold, put under a lot of pressure. I know that. I saw that on Superman one time. Superman took a piece of coal and pressed that. Remember that? I'm talking about the George Reeves Superman. Pressed it and pressed it and pressed it and pressed it, and all of a sudden he opened up his hand, and in that white man's hand was a diamond. I knew that was true once I saw Superman do that. Black coal. That's why they call us diamonds in the rough. Because you see, it's the pressure of life that makes us the diamond. As African people, you know, I never say to myself, why me? I always thank the ancestors for giving me the challenge. Because it's only through your challenge that you're going to perfect your character that takes you and helps you ascend to that higher level. If everything was easy, we would just be the same old mediocre people we've always been.
Bush stopped over to the diamond mines over there in Africa too, right?
That's right. And Liberia. He knows what's in Liberia. He knows there's oil off the coast of Liberia. They just found that. You saw it on like it is. They know Africa is the richest nation on the planet. Those who tie into Africa tie into the future. But there's only one problem. White folk can't stand heat. They will die of melanoma. George Bush already had 3 taken off. Clinton had 4. Their wives have many more taken off. Oh yeah, melanoma is one of the most dangerous things occurring. And the only reason why we know it's so important is because so many of their national leaders are getting it, but they're only mirror reflections of what's happening to all of them. And you see, They came over to Africa and they said that we didn't have souls because our women went on the earth and they didn't have clothes on, okay? But the last time I checked Brighton Beach, they didn't have no clothes on either. What they didn't do is they didn't check the African woman at nighttime when she put that splendid kente cloth on. They checked her out when it was hot during the day. And they gave that the image of African peoples. And yes, in Africa, women and men do walk around with a scant amount of clothes on. But you would do that anywhere where it's hot, particularly when you're melanated. What I think is unnatural is when you don't have that melanation and you walk around with no clothes on. Please, brother.
In France, 5,000 of them died.
That's right. Through the heat wave. Now, please.
5,000 coffins.
I heard it was 10.
It went up there.
But it's not just France, it's Europe. Now, the universe is cleansing its blood system.
That's right.
I mean, this is really a cosmic time. This is why it's so important for us to understand. See, we have to understand what's happening all around the world. We as the African people. We as the African people born and raised in the belly of this beast. There's a unique experience that we have here. We can teach the world how to survive the worst times because we've gone through them. We have the t-shirt to prove that. But we don't know this. We don't know this. And what we have to do as an African people is hold on to our consciousness and understand, because you know, with all the papyri that have been destroyed, all of the Native American codices that have been destroyed, all of the ancient writings that have been destroyed, they didn't destroy those units of information that could help us liberate and emancipate ourselves. And one of them is the Shabaka stone, the pyramid text, the coffin text. And when we didn't write it down, the Dogon remembered it in their mind. You go to the Kuba people of Central Africa. You go to Azania. Dr. Theophilio Benga has a book called Pre-Colonial Africa, where he looks at and he talks about the pre-colonial, the ancient African civilizations of Africa. And that's why Diop used to talk about the cultural unity of Black Africa. And he wrote that book, because there's so much we can understand about ourselves. But this is why when Sanetta had told me what the theme of this presentation would be, it became so important to speak about it. But again, like I said in the beginning, I'm very limited as to what I can speak, because as a sister, sisters in this room feel what I can only think. So this is why it's important that sisters stop the madness. I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. I was coming home on the bus, and I normally read in the back, and I was reading my book, and some sisters came on from high school. And the sisters sat in the back. I've told the story before, so those members know what I'm going to lead to. And they were talking and laughing and doing things that young high school students do. Brothers came on, and one of the brothers must have known one of the sisters on the bus. And somewhere along the line, a question came from the brother, "Yo, where you bitches going?" He didn't say it angrily. He didn't say like he meant anything negative. At that point, I kept reading because I'm nosy now. Because I'm waiting for something. Because I want to see what one of them sisters are going to say. I want to hear one of them say, "I'm no bitch. Don't talk to me that way." But I didn't hear that. This is why I say that as the centers of our civilization, and we brothers got to make this happen also, no doubt. We got to back up and do what we have to do. But sisters, we have got to stop this madness. As mothers, I know what's out there. I can't explain. But I know that as our children are moving forward, somewhere along the line, we got to stop this madness. And I think it's going to start in the home. First of all, I think daddy needs to stay at home. That's one thing right there. Okay, that's the first thing. So sisters, I'm not trying to dump this. I know what we got to do. Brothers got to make it happen too. But even if a brother ain't a man, unfortunately, it will fall on a sister. And we got to teach our daughters, don't accept that word. You're not a bitch. And he ain't a nigger. And don't refer to yourself as Queen Bee. My daughter, when she heard that I was going to do this presentation, oh, she wrote me a list. Okay. Take a song like with 50 Cent and Lil' Kim. Magic Stick. I got the magic stick, okay? You got someone by the name of Genuine. He talking about ride my pony in those jeans. Can I get in those jeans? This young lady, 50 years old. Oh, she took this, she sat down the other day. I wondered what would make my daughter write like this. She said, Daddy, anytime you're going to talk about this, I got the information for you. Here's R. Kelly. See, she teaching me. She's schooling me now. R. Kelly, Bump and Grind. Ludacris, What's Your Fantasy? The Isley Brothers, Mr. Biggs, Body Kiss, Between the Sheets. Tina Turner was Lil' Kim before Lil' Kim was born. So what I'm saying is, let's not jump on the young folks. Because long before Lil' Kim, we had Tina Turner. What's love got to do with it? But not just the fact that you got a song out now called Pimp Juice. Okay, Pimp Juice. Well, I knew something was up between Tina Turner and Ike back then. Ike was one of the biggest pimps that we know. So before we get on our young people, let's see the cycle that has been created through the years. I remember Carla Thomas calling Otis Redding tramp. Come on, we remember that. Now let's go back to our parents' age. Remember the 60-Minute Man? So this ain't something new. But then go back to the plantation, because we can trace it back there. We were singing spirituals, but they were treating us like they were our pimps and we were their prostitutes. So this is nothing new. I'll get into some more of these as we go through this presentation. I just wanted to stop here for a moment just to refresh our memory as to where we're going with this, because Brother Sarnetta said that this is going to be raw, so we're going to be raw, but we're getting there. We ain't raw yet, we're going to get there. Now, and by the way, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to interact with me. This is an interaction kind of thing. Let's go to the quasar. A quasar is called a QSO. It's a quasi-stellar object. They don't quite know how to explain what a quasar is, so they call it a quasi. Quasi means it's that, but it's not that. It's this, but it's not this. It's this, that. Sound like the way they talk to us. They don't know, but they don't want us to know they don't know. So they call things quasi. A quasar is the energy released when gas and dust and stars fall into an immense black hole in the core of such a galaxy, perhaps itself the product of ages of collision and coalescence of smaller black holes. Now, coalescence means to grow together or to fuse. A funneling and eventual emergence into view of matter pouring into a multitude of black holes in other parts of the universe or even other cosmic universes. Now, the reason why I put cosmic in parentheses is because Carl Sagan used the word universe. And to me, that's the base of their greatest problem in astronomy. There is only one universe. There are not multiple universes. There's only one. That's why it's called universe. Because if you had multiple universes, what is outside of the universe you said you just left? Well, whatever is outside of that probably is part of the universe. So they're not multi-universes. What I use as their term of multi-universes is cosmic universe. You can have more than one cosmic universe, but you can't have more than one universe. A cosmic or a cosmos is a coming together of ordered and arranged matter inside of the universe. So that you can have many cosmoses inside of one universe, but you can't have multiple universes because that's like an oxymoron. That's like saying something twice. Many universes is the opposite. You can't have many universes, otherwise it become a many-verse, not a universe. You see? And when you come from a core where you have things in compartments, that's the base of their problem. Because they see everything in compartments as opposed to seeing everything in the whole. So once you view your entire reality as many one things, then everything around you becomes many one things, as opposed to seeing the totality of one thing and we're all in this thing together. Because they actually believe that what they're doing in Iraq, they're going to get away with. They believe that. Now, I could have told them they weren't. But they actually think they are. But you know what the cornerstone to this is? They're getting exactly what they expected. A fight. That's all they understand is fighting. See, you go back to their caveman mentality. They only understand sex and aggression. So they knew what they were getting. They thrive off murder and being murdered. This is why I say we got to be careful as a people. Because we're dealing with someone with a suicide wish. Because even if the European were to kill off every black person on the planet, they'd start to kill each other. And when they got down to the last person, that person would commit suicide. See, we don't know that. We think they operate from... See, you know, one thing my mother used to always say, brilliant philosopher, my mother used to always say, you know, the greatest thing you can have in life is the ability to see yourself as others see you. And she always said you should always strive to take yourself out of yourself and view yourself for who you are and not who you think you are. Europeans can't do that. This is one of their problems. This is why the only thing they can view us as is comedians or sex objects. That's the only relationship they can have to us, because if they were ever to try to look at Denzel Washington as a lover, they'd have a heart attack. They'd have brain freeze, because they can't put themselves into a black person's existence. That something can't happen. Now, they don't mind having a white man with a black woman or an Asian woman. They could even put a black man with an Asian woman, but they cannot put a black man with a white woman without that being the theme of what they're looking at. Like, guess who's coming to dinner? That, you know, if they had, that story could have gone with two white folk. But the whole theme of that story was that he was black. They can deal with it like that. When they deal with a black story, they must put a European in it in order to identify with that. I remember White Tiger, when they talked about that black college. They couldn't talk about the black college as a black college, so they had to put a white student in there in order for them to be able to identify with the story and move through it. Because that's their mentality. That's what the reality is. We as black folk don't see this. We really don't. We honestly believe that they can see the world as the world is. And they can't. Now, I'm not angry. I'm just trying to look at this for what it really is. I'm not emotional. I'm being realistic. One of the cornerstones of children is that one thing children have to work out of in life is selfishness. That's one of the things you always share. You got to share. They got to learn how to share. You got to share. No, that's not all yours. No, that's mine. No, share. Mine. See, but the instinct of an infant, of a child, this is why an infant cries, because it wants your attention. It wants to eat. It wants something. It's constantly crying. When an infant learns, don't cry. Ask for it. And then, well, everything you ask for, you may not get. And then what you do get, you're going to have to share. These are the steps. This is the ascendancy into consciousness. They never got off crying. They still crying. And the reaction to it is to murder, to mayhem, to kill, jealousy. That's all they understand. We, like Dr. Clark used to always say, I'm surprised that you're surprised. Please, my sister.
It's relevant. As you were saying about how they're on that infant crying level. And it also means that whatever we do that is of great merit, they take as their own. For instance, Audubon was a black man, but they made him a white man, so they can have an Audubon society. And Beethoven and everybody else. Yes. They made him white.
I didn't know that about Audubon, but that's interesting. The National Audubon Society. And they have all sorts of lists of books. National Audubon. That's interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I didn't realize that. But, and again, it goes back to the child mentality. When we start to interact with them knowing this, then we will grow. But as long as we interact with them thinking the way in which we think, we'll not be able to deal with them. This is what Malcolm meant when he said, you got to speak in the language you're spoken to. That's what he meant. In whatever phase, in whatever manner it may come, you have to deal in the manner of which it is coming at you. And that way you can effectively deal with it from where it's coming from. Okay. Now, I'm sorry, did you say break time? Oh, okay. Now the black hole. A black hole, when you look at the black hole, as seen from the outside, you would take an infinite amount of time to fall in. Because, and that's a typo, all, because all, not ill, all your clocks, mechanical and biological, would be perceived as having stopped. But from your point of view, all your clocks would be ticking away normally. In other words, your experience would be your normal experience. But someone viewing you from the outside, everything would stop once you're in the black hole. Now, while you're doing this, think in terms of you as an individual and your life. And once you get inside of yourself, and what my mother used to say to me, you should view yourself as others see you. Okay? To me, everything is normal. I'm acting, I'm saying, I'm talking, things like that. But all of you are perceiving me a certain way. And one of the things that a teacher or a facilitator or someone in public has to learn to do is to read people's faces. Take myself out of myself. Okay, yeah, I'm all into this. But I'm going to take myself out and cast myself into you. And in a split second, I have to ask myself, what are you thinking about me right now? Am I making sense? Am I talking nonsense? When I see people and their heads are shaking, that's telling me something. This is what Dr. Clark used to talk to us about, how to read people. When they're looking at you. Sometimes, you know, when I speak, I can see someone go off. Whoosh. In a good sense. Because that's what I want to do. Because I become a point of departure for you at that moment. Because I've said something to you that you connected with, and it's taking you on a ride. And all along this ride you're going on, you're picking up information. You're still listening to me, and I know you are, but you're not directly involved in me. There are some people that are riveted on you, where they just look at you the whole time and there's nothing. They're conscious, they stay in this mode, and they're just looking at you. I know those individuals are looking for something I'm saying. There are other people who will go off, and I see them go off. Zoom. They're off. And then all of a sudden, I'll go around the room and I'll go back to them, and then I'll see that they focused on me again. In other words, they've gone for their ride and they came back. Okay? And then sometimes people are really searching for something. I'll speak a little bit long, and pretty soon, zoom, they're gone again. Now, there's another side that they zoom out because this guy is just crazy. I don't even want to hear this no more. So there are other ways, but again, you've got to take yourself out of yourself in order to view yourself, and that's consciousness. That's consciousness of consciousness. This is why sometimes the way I practice being conscious of my consciousness is what I'll do is I'll speak about myself in the third person, to myself. Like when I was working today, I was saying to myself that he has to go to Soul Brothers Boutique. He has to do a presentation on the black hole. Because when I'm doing that now, I'm looking at myself. I'm not saying I. That's why I speak in we. I speak in the collective. I try to. We try to. But sometimes when we speak in collective, when other people are into that individual, they say, well, who we? I say, we prepared this presentation. Well, who else besides you? So sometimes people don't understand that when they're dealing in the individual. So I move in and out of the we and the I, but basically I try to think of the collective, because that's how you become conscious of yourself, by viewing yourself. And the way in which you view yourself is you speak about yourself in the third person. Okay. Now, black holes, you can continue reading. What I think is interesting is down at the bottom where it says that gravity tunnels, which is talking about a black hole, gravity tunnels provide a kind of interstellar or intergalactic subway, permitting us to travel to inaccessible places much more rapidly than we could in the ordinary way. Can black holes serve as time-space machine carrying us to the remote past or distant future? Now, think in terms of the fact that you are a collection of every ancestor that has ever lived. You can trace millions of years back to the African continent. You see, European has what might call a cataract in their experience. A cataract is rugged rocks that change the flow of where you're going. It interrupts you. Europeans have a cataract. That cataract is the Ice Age. as African people, we have a cataract also. It's the enslavement process. But once you get past that cataract, which is a human-made process, what you do is that you can literally access information from the African continent, from the original concept. This is why we have to be careful how we make the enslavement process affect us. Because the worse it affects you, the worse of a cataract it becomes. And it becomes an impediment to you getting back where you got to go. It's like a slingshot. You take a slingshot, okay? The object is to propel the object into the future, in front of you. The further back you can pull, the greater the strength you have to pull back that slingshot is going to determine how far in front of you it goes. Well, that object in the cosmic slingshot is our mind, our consciousness. And as far back as we can pull it determines how far into the future it's going to go. Make sense? In terms of the metaphor. What happens is that sometimes there are things that hold us back. And the enslavement process could be one of them. I'm not saying forget it. I'm saying don't let it be part of what holds you back from being able to pull that thing back so you can fling yourself into the future, because that's going to hold you back. And you'll only be able to get so far. You want to get as far as you can. Please, my sister, did you have a comment?
Also, like, in terms of, it is an episode in a long history.
Yes.
And like Dr. Finch said, it's almost like if you walk out the door and you look down the past and up the future. And how you view time and space.
Yes. Exactly.
Right? That you're not stuck here.
That's right.
Right?
That's
You
right.
don't-
And that
Who you are.
Because the episode's a brief history and a
Exactly.
brief episode in a long history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Brother says like blink in your eye.
Yeah,
Right?
that's right.
And seriously, when you've been here for as long as we've
This is a brief moment.
That's right.
It's nevertheless to be dismissed,
That's right.
but
And that's also, my sister, is when you hear black folks say, you know,
You see, that's what they use on us also. We can't get over. No, it's not that we can't get over. We can get over. In fact, we're over it. It's just that we're trying to find a way to manage it within the whole scope of our life, because you're still breathing down our neck. You know, like Malcolm said that, you know, they always ask him if he healed. He said, if you stick a knife in someone's back 9 inches and you pull it out 3, well, you still got it 6 inches in. Don't ask me if I heal. Pull the whole knife out. Give me a couple of months to heal, and then ask me if I heal. We as a people are still in the throes of the enslavement mentality. We would like to forget it. It's the white man can't forget it. That's why I say we don't have a problem. Europeans have a problem. And we suffer from the fact they can't get over it. They keep saying that we can't forget it, but they keep throwing it. It's like my good brother Khalid. When they say, well, they always accuse me of fanning the flames. Well, who started the fire? And I've also heard, I think it was Brother Khalid, I'm not sure, I'm sure he might have said it another way, but they always talk about how we played a race card. Well, they put it in the deck. You know, they keep, yeah, but this is, in psychology, it's called dynamic projection. When you project on those whom you wish to oppress your own shortcomings. Therefore, you never have to take the blame for your evilhood, because you always project it on them. They made it happen. This is the rape syndrome that many women go through, is that the man always makes it seem as if it was the woman that made the man want to do it in the first place. You see, they always put that on the opposite, because that way a weak mind never has to accept responsibility for it, because it's the projection on that individual that made it happen in the first place. So look, if you hadn't done it, it wouldn't have happened. And see, this is what we're living. Now, the illusion is we actually think it's our fault. We actually do. Not all of us now, because I'm preaching to the choir. I'm talking about those who we see who are always saying things about us as a people, what we did. Okay? We sold ourselves into enslavement. Okay? You know, I know that. Okay? But the biggest bankers of Hitler were Jews. They gave him most of the money that ransacked. It was Jews that told him who the Jews were in the colleges. For him to take him. This is history. Go into their history. Don't go into what I'm saying. Go into their history and you'll see it. Now they get upset. White supremacists. Because these are not Jews. They hide behind Judaism. Because I have a respect for every faith system that exists. I may not align myself with it. I come from a different spiritual perspective that I assign myself to no religion because from an African mind, I know that an African mind created all of them anyway. So I'm Jewish, Buddhist. I'm agnostic to Zoroastrianism, A to Z. I'm it all. Because there's only one. Dr. Rosalind Jeffries teaches us the oneness, the universe, the one word, the word, the atum, that we have taken on as a people. So I know that whatever faith system you have, it's not your faith system I'm having a problem with. It's your hypocrisy. How dare you mistreat another human being and then claim that God gave you the right to do that? And I'm talking to Saddam Hussein right now too. Because I have no love for them. Let's make it plain. The ancestors of the Palestinians were the Philistines. And the Philistines were the what goes around comes around. The Israelis are treating the Palestinians the way the Palestinians treated the Canaanites. And you'll get what you deserve. Now, as an African people, what I warn us is let them fight. Mind our business. And let's get ourselves together. So that when the dust settles, the Canaanites are back in Canaan. You understand what I'm saying? And when I say this, I say it with no anger. I say it with no malice. I say it as a way to liberate this planet. We've got to free the land. This is far more than just African American, Caribbean African peoples, African diaspora. This is about saving the water, saving the air, saving the land from a child that doesn't know anything about it. At one time, we were the air. We were the water. We were the land. We are light and heat energy. We are everything culminated. We are the purpose of life on the planet. Just like plants were meant to be green, humans were meant to be brown to black. I'm not saying this, nature's saying this. You got an argument, don't argue with me, argue with nature. Because that's how nature made it happen. And it will happen again. Even if they wiped off every African off the planet, we'd still come back the way we are. Now, my brother, when you say 5 minutes, you mean 5 minutes till the end or 5 minutes to a break? Okay, okay. So what I'd like to do now, then, is I'd like to stop and move into the star guide, and then we'll put a hold, because when we turn to the next page, the third page, we now get into biological astronomy. We're still talking about astronomical biology. Here's the star guide. Now, this is a child's encyclopedia. This is an encyclopedia that is in science laboratories in schools. Basically, it's research for younger grades like elementary, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, because the writing isn't that easy. But it is a formative junior high school astronomy guide. This is what they're talking about, black holes in junior high school and high school. The outcome of a supernova explosion. Supernova. A star that explodes, a huge star that explodes. The outcome of a supernova explosion again depends on the original mass of the star itself, the size of it, what it's made of. Stars with a mass up to about 7 times that of our sun leave behind a very dense neutron star, typically only about 12 to 20 miles on kilometers, 20 to 30 miles, 20 to 30 kilometers across. Now think about it. If you break a mile into, let's say, 20 blocks, some people say 25 blocks, what you're dealing with is 12 times 25 to 20 times 25 in terms of how wide it is. Now that's not big at all. Yet that can suck in other things. Now keep that in mind. Stars with even greater mass are virtually crushed out of existence. See, they turn in on themselves. This is what it is. It's an implosion. It's an explosion, but it's an implosion. This is what Dogon talk about, but we'll talk about that as time goes on. They leave behind a region of space with such enormous gravity, a space, because you can't touch a black hole. Think about it, it's a space, it's black. And the reason why it's black is because any time light gets anywhere near it, it gets sucked in, so you never get to see the light. It's powerful stuff. I mean, as an African people, this is why we had such a relationship with the heavens. That's why we say as above, so below. Because we understand that there is a direct relationship, there's a cycle that occurs constantly, and that you can find yourself in the cosmos. And the true self that you are is really the one in the cosmos. As many African folks say that when you dream on earth, that's your reality. When you wake up, you start to dream. They leave behind a region of space with such enormous gravity that nothing, not even light, can escape from it. We call such a region of space a black hole. My brothers and sisters, I'd like to just stop for a moment. I have some material that I will share with you. I encourage you to please share your time and your finances with the vendors, whether it be the material that is outside in the Soul Brothers Boutique, the tapes that Brother Sonetta, the tapes that our brother Big Man have, and I brought material myself. But I speak in the African collective, because if you support them, you support me. And when you support me, you support us. It is important for us to begin to direct our dollars to ourselves. And I'd like to just stop and just say this to you. I deal with Mata products. I believe it's Mata time. I've had enough of going to Pathmark and to Seatown and to other people to get what our people produce. And I'm encouraging you, not just with me, but anybody, find out who's dealing with Mata. I only deal with certain products. I deal with house care and I deal with personal care. In other words, laundry detergent, fabric softener, dishwashing detergent. I deal with hand cream, hand soap. I may not have some of the things with me now, but the reason why I'm saying this is because Mata, and I encourage everybody to get involved in Mata. Here in this store here, this could become a place where you go to get your Mata products. Because the bottom line is this. The reason why George Bush is so important in Africa is because Africa does not have a distribution network. That's what we need. We need a distribution network. We have a lot of African folk that produce great material, but whenever they want to produce it and sell it, they got to go to somebody else in order to distribute it. We need an African-American owned and operated distributing service, and that is what Mata is. When you support Mata, you're supporting an African-American marketing distribution center that allows for things to occur. So I'm encouraging you. I have tapes, but I also wanted to bring that in about Mata because I wanted that on the tape.
They make their own shirts and stuff too.
Okay? The first piece that I shared with you was a listing of the per onc. I spoke to you about a school that we have developed. In fact, we meet and we meet every Thursday. We meet Thursdays from approximately 6:30 to about 8:30. We will be expanding our days. We're looking at other days and other times to make it most comfortable for everybody to be able to make it. It's going to happen as we grow, but we call it per onc. Per onc, per is house, onc is life in the Kemetic language. Per onc means the house of life. We've developed different levels of the per onc, but basically, looking at it from the perspective, we have a per onc academy. A per onc academy is 7 sessions every other Thursday when we meet, and we have developed an African way of approaching science, information, what our children should be learning. It has been my experience in developing schools, institutions, as being part of First World's ASCAC's Institute for Youth. It is now the John Henry Clark Institute for Youth. Being involved in various Saturday programs, after-school programs, community center programs. I've come to realize that we excite our children and we tell them to come, and they come, but we don't have the cadre of adults, the group of adults there committed, conscious, and ahead of the game. In other words, many times adults are learning as the children are learning. Although that's good, that's not the best model. The best model is that when you come, the adult is fully prepared to be able to instruct you and take you through the concept and practice. Otherwise, you start, the child starts asking questions that the adult can't deal with or doesn't know how to deal with. So we decided to first bring forward the adults. We are open to any child from 13 up. So we're talking about high school and up, but we're really focusing on conscious adults. We're not looking for adults with doctorates. We're not looking for ones with teachers' certificates. We're looking for what we're calling the conscious 10th. Now, it could be more than a 10th. It could be less than a 10th. But we're just looking for conscious people. That's the requirement, is that you're committed and conscious and that you understand what time it is. And it's time that we start to develop our own educational institutions. We did it before, and we can do it again. It's not new. One thing I find so glorious about this is that most of the things I'm learning from Marcus Garvey, William Leo Hansberry. I'm learning from the UNIA. I'm learning from Martin Delaney. I'm learning from plantations. I'm learning from a book on how we used to teach each other on the plantation undercover. If we could develop readers and writers and thinkers on the plantation, what can we do out in the open? So it must be a psychological thing. So the Per Ankh, the house of life, is what Kemites in Africa called the house of life. That learning was a living system of existence. So that the Per Ankh Academy is 7 classes. It introduces the community to information that we should have the first, and is broken into 40 seasons. As you will notice, I gave you another handout. It's called 40 Seasons. In this flyer, I really outline on the first page the annual themes, or the cyclical themes I should call them, because we're finding out that it's more than just a year. We thought that we'd be able to teach 4 seasons in 1 year. Once we got into it, our revisions, what we learned from the process, we came to realize we started February 2002, and we completed our 4th cycle June of 2003. So we're almost an entire 3 months ahead or behind, because we realized, first of all, we started with 6 classes. We realized 6 classes wasn't enough. We needed 7. We also found out that the scribes, we call the students scribes, we found out that the scribes need a little bit of time, breathing time, to read some of the material, because we give our reading material. So it's not like we just come and we sit, we listen, we learn. We come, we sit, we take notes, we study, and we are assessed. We are assessed before we start, and we are assessed at the end. It's a wonderful experience for me, because, and also for the scribes, because it allows adults to realize what our children are going through when they have to sit and take a test. So that we do this also, so it's all part of this entire process. So we have 40 seasons, 10 cycles. We begin the first cycle, which we'll be beginning in September 18th. We start with the Kemetic theory on the origin of the cosmic universe, where we teach about astronomy. We teach about the Shabaka stone. The second season is the Dogon people of Mali. We take the Kemetic legacy and we go to West Africa, because remember, Dr. Clark used to always say, don't get caught up in Egypt. As an African people, we always get caught up in Egypt. Egypt was a wonderful and beautiful place, a place of higher learning, but it wasn't the only place in Africa. And sometimes we become so covetous of Egypt that we don't know all of Africa's dynamic. And that there are many different ways of looking at the same thing. Yes, you can have a cultural unity, but when you view an incident from different perspectives, you get multiple ways of looking at something that help you understand it from a different perceptual field. So the second season, we go to West Africa, we look at the Dogon. The third season, we look at the impact of the Moors. And then the 4th season, we deal with melanin. But we deal with melanin from a little bit of a different perspective, because we begin by looking at the sun. Because melanin only has its importance because of the nature of the sun and the impact that it has on us. Then we look at the role that the sun has on plants. Then we look at the role that the sun has on human life. And then we get into the melanin molecule, the carbon atom, the melanocyte, the melanosome, and then just life in general. And then we touch on neuromelanin, because we know down the line we're going to devote an entire year. And that's why today's presentation is so interesting, because we have an entire cycle, 4 seasons, that's entitled Secrets Within the Black Hole. Because black hole replicates itself throughout all consciousness, throughout all parts of life. The carbon atom, the melanin molecule, all of those other things that would bring forward organic life is really just manifestations of the cosmic black hole. And so that's going to be our first year. And then we get into cosmic beginnings, which the cycle that went through all 4 cycles, we're now going to take them to the second cycle, starting with this concept here. But this is what the Per Ankh is attempting to do. And in the end result, the eye is on the sparrow, and the sparrow is our children and nation. Because Dr. Clark said, if what you're doing ain't about building a nation, it ain't about nothing. So that what we're attempting to do is now reach out to our community of conscious people. Don't have to be a teacher. We have nurses, we have dentists, we have people who are interested in law, we have students. We have people who just are tired and who don't want to go out like chumps. I'm not going out like this, I'm sorry. They're going to say the brother was trying to put something together. I've had enough. I've had enough of putting our children in the hands of not just alien people, but alien people that mean our people no good. I've had enough of that. There's only so much I can do. There's only so much any of us can do. And that's why the Parank is built on the community, not on me. I call myself a facilitator. And the question I ask the scribes all the time is, the strength of the Parank is how you can answer this question. If you were to hear one Thursday that I am no longer on the planet, would the Parank stop functioning or could it continue? If it stopped, I'm not doing my job. Because one of the worst things we do as a people is that we center things around the individual and not around the community. So the strength of the Parank is not about me, it's about us. It's about how we all can get a sense of what's in my mind. Because I got a sense of what was in Professor Clark's mind as I sat with him and he told me certain things. And I kind of got a sense of how I could take who I was. See, because just like the Dogon have a way of learning, they have something known as Jiriso. And then they have Beniso. And then they have Boloso. See, these are the scribes of the Parank talking about. And then the fourth step is Sodai. You have the word in the front, the Jiriso. That's what you see. Superficial information. That's what we teach our kindergarten children. We tell them stories, give them morals, precepts. As they get a little older, as the consciousness gets deeper, we then introduce them to Beniso. Beniso is the words on the side. Beniso is when you're no longer looking straight, but you look to the sides. That's the information that is imprinted all around us. So now you have a view of the front, but you couldn't have gotten to the sides if you hadn't mastered what was in front. So superimposed upon what you see in front is information on the sides. And then as you get deeper and you get into your college years, then you're introduced to the concept of looking behind you, or the boloso, or the back word, the word in behind you. But you couldn't have gotten to the back word if you didn't know the side word, if you didn't know the front word. So that one is built on the other. And then as you got into your eldership, 65, 70 years old, that's when you got the Sodai, which is the pure word, the spirit word, the word from the inside. So that as opposed to teaching this nonsense information that the Board of Ed teaches, we choose to approach it from an African perspective. In ancient Kemet, you had the initiate, you had the apprentice, and then you had the son and the daughter of light. And I have to say son and daughter because we didn't spell it S-O-N, we spelled it S-U-N, and any male or female could have been a son of light. Interesting thing, a brother by the name of Dr. Obatashaka came to an ASCAD conference and he gave it to us another way. He looked at it as a musician. And the reason why I say this is because this is how I see an educator, and I reflected as I myself, we, were to Professor Clark. Because Obatashaka used the analogy of a musician who has an apprentice that wants to play like the master musician. And so in the beginning, you imitate your master teacher. In other words, when I was talking, there was times people say, you know, you sound just like Professor Clark. Why? Because I was imitating him. Everything he said, I repeated. This is how children learn. That's why the first step in literacy is listening. You listen, and you repeat what you hear. And that's what I did with Professor Clark. But as I began to gather content information and ways of understanding, the second step from imitation becomes assimilation. In other words, you take the very best of your master teacher and the very best in yourself and you bring them together. And that's what we teach our children. Professor Clark once told me, he said, you know, you all up underneath me right now, but there's a time in my life, I hope you ain't anywhere near me. Because you are supposed to be taking what I'm telling you and take it somewhere else. If you're always up underneath me, that's why he always said ministers never truly administer to the souls of the people. Otherwise, they go out and administer to other people. But when you make your flock always around you, that means you want something other than just that spiritual encouragement, which means give me your money. Okay. So that assimilation piece comes in, where I took the best of myself, as students would take the best of their teacher or themselves, blended with the best of the teacher, because I am not Professor Clark, and Professor Clark is not me. I never plan on taking his place. No one will ever take his place. No one will ever be Professor John Henry Clark, but guess what? Nobody should, because there was only one Professor Clark. That's what a good student learns. No, I don't want you mimicking me. I want you to mimic me until you learn who you are. Take the best of who you are and the best of what you got from me, and that's when you assimilate, or you become an apprentice. After you've assimilated this information for years and gotten this in place, you then take this assimilation and you become an innovator. In other words, you take the best of the master and the best of yourself and create something that neither of you ever did before. And that's the innovator. And that's the process of life. And that's the cornerstone to the Perunk. The Perunk is not to create new Malcolms, not to create new Harriet Tubmans, but to take people with the spirit of Malcolm, with the spirit of Harriet Tubman, the spirit of Dr. Khalid Muhammad, and all the others that have come before us, and do things that they never did, but they gave you the potential to know that you could do. That's the Perunk, unlike anything we have out here today. Not that it's new, it's just not out here today. To my knowledge, in New York. I could be wrong, but I'm seeking a place like this. And you know, the funny thing is that when you can't find what you need, follow Amos Wilson. Create it yourself. Why are we begging people to do something we know they're not going to do? And if they did it, they would do it so wrong, we'd wish they never touched it in the first place. This was my challenge with Ebonics. I know Ebonics works. Why am I going to give an alien people my code? Why am I going to teach them how to teach me? If I taught them how to teach me, they would unteach me what I wish they would teach me. Why would I teach my code? That's why I wasn't for Ebonics going into the public school system. Not just that, it would have been used as an excuse. They can't even teach our children what they've been trained to teach them. If they can't teach them what they know, what they going to do with what they don't know? So they would miseducate them and blame Ebonics. I'm not going to give you anything else that you can use as to why you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Follow my chain of thought. So the Perunk is a place where we're hoping to bring conscious, committed people, and not to overwhelm you with a lot of classes, with a lot of reading, because that chases the masses of our people away. We have some folk that can't read. So reading is not important. They can teach and they can learn, but down the road. See, I remember the Honorable Elijah Muhammad used to tell the story that there were folk that wouldn't come up to his presentations. So what he did was that he used to pay them. And once they got a load of what the brother was saying, they started giving him money to support the nation, because the money was the enticement. But once they got there and heard what he was saying, they said, oh, this is it. Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the pineal gland of the 20th century. That was a brilliant brother. Absolutely. That brother knew that he was not the best articulator. So he went out and found the best articulator he could in the brother Malcolm X. He knew he wasn't the best economist in the world. So what he did is he went out and got the best economist that built one of the most formative economic nations that ever existed. He knew he wasn't the greatest lawyer, but he went out and got the greatest lawyers. He wasn't the greatest doctor, he went out and got the greatest doctors. He was the pineal gland of the African human body.
But didn't it take great brilliance to realize what you said? Except what you
Absolutely.
Don't know?
But my sister, that's the cornerstone. We all are trying to be every facet of the body. And that's not what we got to be. We just got to be good at what the Creator has given us the gift for. The left hand don't do what the right hand does. And if it did, it would do it wrong. Because then the left hand would be a misnamed right hand. The liver doesn't do what the stomach does, and the stomach doesn't do what the cerebrum does, and the cerebrum doesn't do what the fingernail does. But together they function as a body that can perform all of the greatest tasks that can be done. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the pineal gland. He was the creative force that could tap into a human being and knew who had what and could sense it. And that's what we need. And was not threatened by it. Can't be threatened by it. Because wouldn't it be crazy for the right hand to be jealous of the left foot? I mean,
The right hand would triple. And the right hand to get back would grab the left foot, so that there's a function to what we have to do.
One of his main goals was to get back to the black woman, to awaken that ancient science and mathematics that is deep within her womb. That's why he stayed close to the woman, to teach that black woman again. Because she have lost the science of raising up the child, of giving him that information that he needs.
You know, one of the
when I was going to do libation, I was going to dedicate this presentation to a sister by the name of Hypatia. Hypatia was one of the greatest and most brilliant mathematicians in Kemet. In this book, there's a chapter about Hypatia. Romans would bring their whole flocks of people and park their chariots outside her temple and sit at her feet to learn mathematics. This is called The Black Woman in Antiquity, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. There is a chapter in here by Beatrice Lumpkin that talks about Hypatia and women's rights in ancient Egypt, page 155. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because of the nature of the role of who we are as a people and what we have to do and what we have to get back to. Remember, I see t-shirts that says, respect the black woman. She is the first teacher. When you look at science, everything is centered around the feminine principle. When you look at the act itself, we were speaking earlier about the concepts of sex. And that's really why my daughters got so interested in this, because I said, today I'm coming to talk about sex. So if there is anyone who feels that they should separate themselves from this presentation, I ask that this might be the time to do it. The reason why I'm saying this is because that is a sacred act. And the woman plays not just a pivotal role, but the magnetic role in this act. And when we look at the work that I gave you, if you go to page 3, I call it biological astronomy. Say again? 40 seasons. I'm sorry, you... Oh, no, what I'm saying right now comes out of the handout that I gave you earlier. And again, this is all part of what we have to talk about. You have it? It comes from a book called Biology for Dummies. And this is why the original God, the original creator, while both male and female, was really given more of a feminine principle because of the nature of what brings forward creation. Yes, the man has half the role. As you look at this, the whole purpose of life is reproduction. Reproduction is a matter of life and death. Behind reproduction is cell division. There are two processes of cell division. And again, I'm not going to stay deep in this because of the nature of where we have to go. But I'm just going to brush along this. If you want more information, you can always get it in any of the biology books. There's mitosis and meiosis, which is the splitting and the reproduction of cells. The nucleus is at the center of the cell, and the nucleus of the sex cell is where the heredity materials of cells are assembled into chromosomes. This is what science teaches us. At the cornerstone of the chromosome is the coiled molecular repositories of what is known as DNA. Again, this is what science teaches us today. deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. The DNA, like Amos Wilson's book, is a blueprint. Just like he wrote a blueprint for Black Power, that blueprint is like a cell. You read that book, that will give you every facet you need for Black Power. In the blueprint cell of DNA, it is half male and half female. The male is known as sperm, and the creation of the sperm cell is known as spermatogenesis, genesis meaning the creation of. And the other half is the female egg, which is pronounced oogenesis, although it's spelled O-O, and then Genesis is the long O, oogenesis. Together, they create one, and if you see how I wrote this word, whole E unit, holy unit. Together, they are holy. Gametogenesis, copulation, the act of engaging the man inside of the woman, the male inside of the female, creates fluids. The male sends the fluids in with an electrical flow. The female, in creating the fluids, opens her cervix, and the egg magnetizes the fluid to become an incoming wave to direct the sperm to the egg. This is why I've often said that the very first thing that Europeans should have done when they came out the mountains was find them the first black opposite sex partner they could. To show how insane this is, they created selective choice, which meant that they only would go with their own, and made it a sin, made it a violation of the law to go with a person outside of their own cultural background. I have a tape of an albino gorilla. This albino gorilla will beat off other albino males, because it's a female, and will only go with a black male. A colored peacock will beat, an albino peacock will beat off other albino peacock males, knowing the only essence, when you are albinoid, the only essence that can bring forward the original entity is the original entity. When you only will go with your own, you are mutating a mutation, which further down the line creates the madness that we're experiencing today.
Hold up, say that one more time.
Okay.
I messed up there, man.
Okay. I can use a cockroach as an example. In nature, you see, we got to move away from our anger and our emotion and view this through science. Whenever a European mates, when I say European, I mean someone from the European having experienced the Ice Age, just to be scientific. Whenever they mate with a person, I'm going to say it of color, if they mate with an Asian, that child becomes Asian. If they mate with an African, if an Asian mates with an African, the child becomes African. The closer you go back to the original species is what the child becomes. You see? When they came out the mountains, in order to survive, the first thing they should have done is forbid. They should have gone the opposite way. Forbid the miscegenation of themselves with their other European, like the albino gorilla. The albino gorilla will not allow an albino gorilla to mate with her. She will beat him off and say, give me that black one. Because she knows that black one is going to bring forward a purer form of the gorilla. Let me use a plant. Let me use a vine. Let's use ivy that crawls up a wall. Ivy that crawls up a wall, its life is determined by it being able to hook onto the wall. There's some ivy that will veer off. Every ivy that veers off will die. It is only the ivy that can cling to the wall that remains living. So that when the African family, and I know that there are many different views as to how the European came into existence. I'm aware of the concepts of Yaqub, Okay? And I believe that happened. My scientific concept tells me that that may not have been the only way it happened, although that I believe that did happen. I believe that millions of years in Africa, with African people through science bringing forward albinoids, they would wonder, what is this albinoid doing here? What is this? They would want to find out what it was about. So they would do the experimentation necessary to find out not only how it came here, but how it could continue to produce it. So I can see that happening. But I also look to the work of Charles Finch, and I look to the work of people like LeGrand Clegg. I look to the work of Dr. Richard King, who also talk about Africans migrating to other parts of the world. And over long periods of time, they themselves. But the European that we know today is very new to the planet. That European that we know today is not the European that was first found in Europe, known as Cro-Magnon. Cro-Magnon is almost a duplicate of what happens when a Proto-Aryan or Eurasian mates with a Proto-Dravidian or an African. It appears that they are the same person. Now, it's that Cro-Magnon that began to mate with other Cro-Magnons and refused to go to the darker complexion peoples, which eventually the mutation began to mutate within itself. And the European is not a new entity. That's why I say that the European is a baby. Now, everything that I say, nothing's written in stone. Please understand this. What I'm saying is not fact. It's a theory. It is our children's children and the children's children's children researching this from the Parank, studying this, getting better at it, that will bring forward the truth. We're still working this out. So what I say is not written in stone. It is another kind of theory that can bring us to an understanding as to why these folk would conduct themselves the way they do. Now, we speak about all. I never speak in absolutes. So it's important that when we speak in a way that can capture the essence of what we're saying and not the absoluteness of what we're saying. Okay? And again, it's something that I always like to say because sometimes we get caught up in dogma and truisms. Sometimes we sometimes have a fuzzy relationship between what is fact and what is theory. So all of these concepts are open for us to understand. However, when you look at nature, an albinoid cockroach is a cockroach that has not yet seen the light of day. Okay? In nature, you know the ones that stay in the cupboard, never come out. They're albinoid. They're albinos. There are animals throughout nature that because they do not derive the necessary relationship between the sun and themselves, they depigment themselves, whether it be a cockroach, whether it be a gorilla, whether it be a, and I just said that bird that has many different colors. I just said it. Peacock. Okay, because these are the examples that we use in biology. When you open up a book and you deal with mutation, I have a book called Evolution that we teach in school. When you deal with evolution, they do not use human beings. They only use animals. Because they know what they'd have to say if they use humans. So they talk about what happens with peacocks. They talk about what happens with cockroach. I have the tape on the gorilla. Okay? But you got to translate that into the human. What happened to the human? J.A. Rogers in Sex and Race. He says, white sugar is brown sugar robbed of its nutrients. Right. He says white rice is brown rice robbed of its nutrients. Then he hits them. White folk are black folk robbed of their nutrients. And the nature of melanation is not just in your skin, because that's your largest organ. Melanin is in every part of your body. And as you look up into the sky tonight, you're looking at cosmic melanin. And that is why everything comes out of blackness. Stars come out of blackness. Light comes out of blackness. And that is why you have white holes and you have black holes. But the problem is that we assign properties to white that make it pure. good. And properties that are assigned to black are bad. You got black magic, white magic. Yeah, there's a blackout. That was a whiteout. Now that's backwards right there. What I remember is that the white was out, not the black. The black was in. That was a black in and a white out. You know what I'm saying? It was a whiteout. It wasn't a blackout. But because of the nature of their fear, in lights out, their greatest fear comes forward, and so it becomes a blackout. The darkest economic day was Black Tuesday, Black Monday. If you sin, bad is black sin. If you sin, if you lie light or sin, it's a white lie. It's a lie you can get away with. Black tie affair and white tie affair, black magic and white magic, blacklist and whitelist. So that what happens when a child now is called black child? Now you've already assigned all these bad things to black, and now you have a black child and a white child. So again, the psychology of what happens within the minds of our people has genetically and generationally been given to us. I shouldn't say genetically, generationally been given to us so that we begin to think it without it even being said.
Now what they are doing, they're putting a white child with a black boy, and pictures all over the place now.
Yeah. Yes. And listen, look outside. Listen to the music. Listen to what our children are saying. Lil' Kim and Foxy Brown. Listen to what DMX and Genuine, Jay-Z. It's all about sex. It's all about a man placing his reproductive organ within a woman's reproductive organ. That's what it's all about. That's what sells. If you want to sell a car, unclothe a woman and just put her on the car and they'll buy that car.